Let's bring in Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary and Intelligence Committee. Senator, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me on again, Brett.
I want to ask you about guns in a second, but I want to start with our lead story about that executive action by President Biden on solar panels, reducing tariffs, and initiating the Defense Production Act on climate areas.
Yeah, it's a good question, Brett. I'm not sure what the emergency is here, other than he has a deep division in the Democratic Party and the solar industry between people who make solar panels in America and those who buy them. If Joe Biden is not willing to protect American manufacturers in the green energy industry, then he's not willing to protect any traditional industry from China's economic crimes, especially since it seems that a lot of the parts and inputs, if not the panels themselves, are made in the Xinjiang province, where China uses slave labor from religious and ethnic minorities. But more fundamentally, Brett, when gas is approaching $5 a gallon on average across the country, $7 and $8 in some states, the fact that the Biden White House is focused on solar energy as opposed to getting gas prices under control really tells you where their priorities are.
But what do you think is at the heart of that? I mean, he says he wants to do everything to bring gas prices down, but obviously they're not doing everything they could be doing, and this executive action proves that.
Yeah, they're not, and it's not a priority because it's not a priority for Democratic politicians to bring gas prices down. Remember, this is exactly what Joe Biden said in the campaign, that we're going to phase out energy sources like oil and gas and coal. So for Democrats who have these Green New Deal fantasies, $5 gallon gas is not an accident. It's not an unintended consequence. It's very much the intended consequence. They want gas to be high because they want you out of your pickup truck or your minivan and want you to get into electric vehicles or scooters or mass transit or whatever it is that they ride around town in Washington. But that's not the way most Arkansans live. It's not the way most Americans live.
All right, talks on Capitol Hill, on the Senate side in particular, about coming to some conclusion, some compromise on guns, mental health, school security. Here is Senators Manchin and Murphy. Take a listen.
We know we can do something that would have prevented this, raising the age, making sure that the age at least gives us a chance to work with that person, see and evaluate and have a little maturity to them. And the second thing is that we know that the red flag laws do work as long as there's due process.
The House is going to act this week. My hope is in the following weeks, the Senate will act as well. Progress, I hope, will show many of our Republican holdouts that the sky doesn't fall if they support common sense anti-gun violence measures.
So are you for raising the age to buy an AR-15 to 21?
Well, Brett, even the liberal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals out in California has already said that's unconstitutional. I don't think that we should be infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens because of gun criminals. You just had earlier, a few moments ago, news from Philadelphia and the terrible shooting you had over the weekend there. It is a simple fact that the vast majority of gun crimes in this country are committed by serious, violent felons, often involved in the drug trade. That's why I've got legislation that would impose mandatory minimums on felons in the possession of a firearm at all, that would increase penalties for felons who use a gun or who have a career of committing crimes using firearms. Now, the Democrats have traditionally opposed these measures because it cuts against their desire to reduce mandatory minimums, to reduce the prison population. But if we want to get at the vast majority of gun crimes, that's a good place to start.
But if there's a compromise to be had, and if it's not, we're going to take guns or we're going to somehow exclude or infringe on the Second Amendment, and it's to raise an age or increase a background check for an AR-15 or the like, why not get in that conversation?
Well, we don't know what the compromise will be first. We don't know what legislation might look like. I'll, of course, evaluate any proposal, but I'll evaluate it with a view to the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens and also what would actually work once we know all the facts. The facts that have come out of Uvalde for the last 2 weeks have been changing somewhat. We may have the basic contours, but there's still more that we need to learn to ensure that we have a proposal that would actually solve the problem. In addition, some of the proposals that you've discussed or that we heard in those clips are more appropriately addressed at our state capitol level by our state legislatures rather than here in Washington, D.C.
You wrote a letter to the White House about their effort to potentially reduce student loan debt, federal student loan debt, but you have a concern about ethics.
Yeah, Brett. At a time when the president is talking about canceling $10,000 of student loan debt for any American who has it, he has numerous White House aides who actually have student loan debt, who are working on this matter in violation of his own ethics guidance. That's inappropriate. More fundamentally, he doesn't have the legal authority to cancel student loan debt, and it's deeply unfair. What about all those kids who went to college and worked during college and didn't take out loans, or they paid their loans back? Or the vast majority of Americans who don't have a college degree, who work as waiters and waitresses or truck drivers or have a small lawn care business, they didn't take out loans. And now we're going to ask them to repay the loans of people who did go to school and who agreed to repay them. That is deeply unfair. The president shouldn't do it. He certainly shouldn't have aides who are going to benefit from it working on the matter.
Always like to ask you questions about foreign policy, but I don't have a lot of time. I want to end with this. January 6th committee is doing primetime hearings starting Thursday night. Your thoughts of this as we get ready to hear whatever they're going to bring to the table in their investigation?
Well, I've seen a lot of reports recently say that this committee, which I think is illegitimate under the House own rules and resolution that created it, is now geared towards things like federalizing our election laws or abolishing the Electoral College. And I think that tells you a lot about what Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats wanted with this committee. It was an effort to try to push through their preferred electoral system to address their weaknesses in our electoral system, as opposed to simply find facts on a bipartisan basis. I expect you'll see partisan theater this week.
But you did call January 6th a dark day. Could you hear something that's going to make that even more prevalent for you?
Well, look, a lot of people committed violent crimes on January 6th, and if they assaulted federal law enforcement officers in particular, they should be held accountable for those crimes. But I think what the House Democrats have done with this committee from the very beginning is target a lot of people who had no involvement at all in that day and are using it to advance their political agenda, especially when it comes to radical proposals like federalizing our election law or abolishing the Electoral College.
Senator Cotton, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Brett.